On this Friday night, the fight against COVID-19 gets another shot in the arm. Health Canada approves Oxford-AstraZeneca's vaccine.
This is great news.
Plus, a reality check on whether delaying the second dose actually saves lives. America's airstrikes on Iran-backed militias, the revenge for a deadly rocket attack, and cracking the code.
We just thought that it was a game.
The hidden puzzle on perseverance.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The vaccination campaign in this country is picking up steam. Canada has given the green light to the Oxford-AstraZeneca shot. It's the third vaccine approved for use here, and the first shipments are expected within days. Canada has also partnered with India's Serum Institute to get 2 million doses of the AstraZeneca Covishield vaccine as soon as possible. 500,000 are reported to be arriving on Wednesday. The doses are in addition to the 20 million already secured with AstraZeneca.
So there are a lot of numbers out there. Here's the bottom line. With Pfizer, Moderna, and now AstraZeneca, Canada will get to more than 6.5 million doses by the end of March.
Michael Couteur explains what we know about the AstraZeneca vaccine and how it will impact Canada's vaccination rollout.
The next several weeks to months is going to be very, very good in terms of the vaccination front.
From doctors on the front lines to politicians in the halls of power, the reaction to the approval of a third COVID-19 vaccine for use in Canada was unanimous.
I think it's the best news we've heard in a real long time, and the two questions we need answered is when we're getting it and how much we're getting.
Canada has a contract for 22 million doses of the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine, some of which are part of a deal with the Serum Institute of India. And the first shipment will be significant.
500,000 doses will be delivered to Canada in the coming days.
The Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna shots are mRNA vaccines, but Oxford-AstraZeneca's is a more conventional viral vector vaccine, which can be stored at temperatures between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius, meaning it can travel more easily and be administered in your doctor's office or a pharmacy. But there's one stat some are stuck on. This vaccine has a 62% efficacy rate, much lower than the two already approved in Canada. Dr. Supriya Sharma says you need to dig a little deeper into the science to understand what this all means.
The number of cases of people that died from COVID-19 that got vaccine was 0. The number of people that were hospitalized because their COVID-19 disease was so severe was 0.
Doctors point out, depending on the year, the seasonal flu shot is only about 60% effective. The point of the COVID-19 vaccine isn't just to prevent you from getting COVID-19, it's to reduce the effects of the virus.
It's a huge public health win, transforming a severe illness into something that's very mild and easily dealt with by your immune system.
And that could come even quicker with the approval of the Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine. Health Canada officials say the review of that vaccine is in the final stages, but they don't expect any announcement in the next few days. Robin.
Mike Couture in Ottawa. Thanks, Mike. More Canadians are being vaccinated, but case numbers are on the rise in 3 of Canada's biggest provinces. Daily case counts in Ontario, Alberta, and BC have increased between 8 and 14% over last week. The same 3 provinces are reporting the highest number of infections involving those concerning variants.
Given the much narrower margin of error with these variants, controlling the epidemic would be much more difficult.
That rise in variant cases is putting more pressure on protecting vulnerable Canadians. Some in the medical community are calling for a new rollout strategy that considers delaying the second dose. Heather Yourex-West looks at the risks and possible rewards.
At this vaccination clinic in Laval, Quebec, the race to protect as many vulnerable seniors as possible is on. It's currently open to anyone 85 or older. 88-year-old Fernand Beaupré says his kids made him come.
They said you have to get vaccinated. We don't want to lose you.
Quebec is handling vaccine rollout differently than other Canadian provinces. Along with New Brunswick, Quebec has decided to get more first doses into people's arms by delaying a second dose by as much as 90 days.
When you're in a vaccine-limited setting, as we are in Canada at the moment and will be for the next few months, we can effectively vaccinate twice as many people.
It's a strategy that so far appears to be paying off in the UK. Britain became the first country in the world to approve a 12-week interval between doses. Not only does more than a quarter of its population now have at least one dose, spacing the second dose, at least with the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine, appears to improve the vaccine's efficacy as well.
They've released some preliminary data showing that they have a 12-week interval between doses, and that seems to be more protective than the initial recommended time between doses, which I believe was 6 weeks.
There is also evidence that a single dose of either the Pfizer-BioNTech or Moderna vaccine provides good protection too.
In healthcare workers, we could see a protection in the range of 80% that started about 14 days after being immunized. Whereas for long-term care facility residents, it took a little longer, about 3 weeks before this protection kicked in.
There are risks to extending the interval between doses. The science on this is essentially being done in real time. But with the spread of variant cases increasing the threat of a Canadian third wave, missing the chance to get more people vaccinated sooner carries a risk as well. Heather, Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
The CEO of Canada's largest pension fund has resigned and is taking heat over a trip outside the country. Mark Machin went to the United Arab Emirates for personal reasons, despite an advisory against non-essential travel. Machin also arranged to get the COVID-19 vaccine while there. Global News has learned the defense minister was not aware of any allegations or investigation before Admiral Art MacDonald was appointed chief of the defense staff. A spokesperson for Harjit Sajjan says he became aware of the allegations a number of weeks after the change of command. MacDonald stepped aside this week pending an investigation with no official explanation. Just last month, he took over from General Jonathan Vance, who's accused of inappropriate behavior with 2 female subordinates. Today, Conservative leader Erin O'Toole called for an independent investigation into the military's handling of sexual misconduct within its ranks. As David Akin reports, the Prime Minister took some tough questions on the matter today.
The dual investigations of the conduct of Canada's highest-ranking military officers has rocked the Canadian forces. But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was reluctant to say much about those probes.
I won't be commenting specifically on this process at this time, other than to say that the following of all the steps in this to make sure that everyone has a chance to be heard and that people understand how seriously we take all these concerns.
The opposition leader, Erin O'Toole, who spent nearly a decade in uniform as an Air Force officer, sees a broader issue. He wants a system-wide independent external investigation and a freeze on promotions and pay bumps for all generals, admirals, and other senior flag officers until that investigation is done.
We cannot allow our daughters, our sisters, and our mothers to work in an unsafe environment. No one should be subjected to sexual harassment when they show up to serve their country.
Meanwhile, experts told the House of Commons Defense Committee Friday that those in uniform, including the acting chief of the defense staff, Lieutenant General Wayne Eyre, cannot wait for investigations to run their course.
People need leadership in times of crisis. General Eyre is it right now, so this is obviously needed from the PM and Defense Minister too, but Canadian Armed Forces members will look to their service commanders and CDS to set the tone.
David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
In a statement today, Lieutenant General Wayne Eyre says we must strive to ensure we look after our people, all of them, and ensure we are an institution in which Canadians can see themselves. How we do things is as important as what we do. A newly released U.S. intelligence report has confirmed Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved an operation to capture or kill journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The report says the assessment was based on the Crown Prince's control of decision-making in the kingdom, the direct involvement of a key advisor, and members of his protective detail. Khashoggi was an outspoken critic of the Saudi regime. In 2018, he was tortured, killed, and dismembered inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. The U.S. has carried out an airstrike targeting Iran-backed militias in Syria. It's the first military action undertaken by the Biden administration. The Pentagon says it was retaliation for recent attacks on U.S. interests in Iraq. As Jennifer Johnson reports, the message behind this strike may be more powerful than the attack itself.
In his first known show of force as America's commander-in-chief, U.S. President Joe Biden ordered airstrikes on buildings used by Iranian-backed militias in eastern Syria. The action was retaliation for the militia strikes in Iraq last week that wounded a U.S. military member and killed an American civilian contractor. President Biden ignored reporters' questions about the airstrikes as he left the White House for Texas. But the Pentagon says the president's message was clear.
The United States will act to protect American and coalition personnel and our security interests in the region.
The airstrikes in Syria targeted the Guardians of Blood Brigade, which took responsibility for the attack that killed and wounded the Americans in Iraq. The Pentagon says 9 of their facilities were destroyed.
We know what we did. And we're confident that that target was being used by the same Shia militia that conducted the strikes.
Iran's leaders deny any links to the group, but the back-and-forth military strikes could complicate the Biden administration's efforts to renegotiate a nuclear deal with Iran. Former President Donald Trump rescinded the previous agreement. President Biden has pledged to try and keep a tighter rein on Iran. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
A journey out of North Korea took 36 hours, and that last leg was likely the hardest. Employees of Russia's embassy in Pyongyang and their families used a hand cart to push their way across the bridge that separates Russia and North Korea. They got to the border by train, but had to improvise to cover the last kilometer of their journey back home. The rail link between the two countries is closed because of the pandemic. On the hunt for the perfect spy. Coming up, the help wanted ad from Canada's spy agency raising eyebrows. Canada's spy agency inadvertently launched a recruitment campaign that seeks a double agent. On Twitter, CSIS used this quote from John le Carré's 1986 novel, A Perfect Spy. But the book is about a double agent who betrayed his country. CSIS says the tweet was meant to be a tribute to the late British author, and people should only apply to protect their country and keep their fellow Canadians safe. Preliminary findings suggest voter turnout in Newfoundland and Labrador could hit a record low. The recent outbreak of cases certainly threw the province's general election out of whack. And as Ross Lord reports, there are growing questions about how the Premier is balancing his leadership during a pandemic while being a political candidate.
In Newfoundland and Labrador, it seems everything is a test, from ramped-up COVID-19 swabbing to an evaluation of Premier Andrew Furey. Polls show Furey's big lead in the election campaign has shrunk since the outbreak started. Furey rarely makes himself available to the media outside of regular COVID briefings where reporters are told not to ask any political questions. This political analyst suggests by appearing at the briefings, Furey risks being seen as using them to bolster his campaign.
If he's going to be there, it should be crystal clear why the Premier is necessary there. He hasn't made that clear in these briefings.
The two previous provinces to hold pandemic elections, Saskatchewan and British Columbia, kept politicians away from COVID briefings.
It would not be appropriate for him to be on the campaign and have the opportunity to speak publicly twice a week, but he will very much be involved in ensuring the ongoing management of the crises.
But Furey insists he's only there to provide reassurance.
Well, yeah, no, I think it's important that the people of the province realize that there's still a premier and there's still a cabinet in place.
Furey says he gives no input to the province's chief medical examiner on imposing pandemic restrictions. The province's election has already been muddled. The outbreak forced planners to delay voting and switch to mail-in ballots. There are fears of a record low turnout, with some residents admitting they won't vote out of frustration. PC leader Ches Crosby says he's collecting information that could be used to launch a legal challenge of the makeshift plan. There are already suggestions the province might need a do-over.
It's possible we don't want to wait around for the courts for however long it'll take to tell us so. It's possible we can figure this out on our own, that we might actually just need to have another election anyway.
Those who are voting have 2 weeks remaining to get their ballots in the mail. Ross Lord, Global News.
The Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage held a virtual meeting to discuss Bill C-10, also known as the Bill to Modernize the Broadcasting Act. Several key players in the industry, including Chorus Entertainment, which owns Global News, took part.
Bill C-10 is not perfect, but it gets one big thing right. It will finally bring foreign digital broadcasters into the regulatory fold and start to level the playing field for Canadian media. And for us, this is reason enough to support it.
The long-anticipated legislation was introduced last November. It's the first in a three-pronged government approach to regulate online streaming services and their influence in Canada. Conspiracy warning still ahead, the infodemic emerging from the pandemic. What's historic about the pandemic we are in now is the use of technology and social media on a massive scale to keep the public informed. But those platforms are also being used to spread disinformation and conspiracies about the virus. Jeff Semple has more on how Canadians can break the chain of misinformation.
Dr. Joy Hatley is fighting COVID-19 on two fronts.
Big breath in.
Caring for patients at this Ontario hospital while also battling a parallel pandemic.
Why do you lie on your news?
Of disinformation. Claims COVID-19 is a hoax.
It's now affecting my ability to care for my patients because there's a trust factor and there's an uncertainty on their part. It's a topic of conversation at most dinner tables.
Including her own. Hatley started hearing COVID conspiracies from members of her own family. Her father sharing videos like this one.
It's about creating fear so that people will not ask any questions.
With widely debunked claims that the COVID-19 test is fake and that Bill Gates is secretly inserting trackable microchips into the vaccines.
So I went back to my dad and I said, Dad, I'm starting to worry about you. Like, that's just nuts.
Because people are afraid.
This expert in conspiracies says that the pandemic has produced a perfect storm of fear, frustration, and isolation, with more time spent online.
It's not people who are uneducated or people who are, on the lowest end of the socioeconomic tiers. It's people everywhere that are being brought into this.
The COVID conspiracy super spreaders include an eclectic mix of anti-vaxxers, as well as anti-immigrant and far-right hate groups. And much of their disinformation is now focused on vaccines.
We've picked up the Chinese basically spreading falsehoods about Western vaccines, that they can't be trusted. I think the wider concern is that if these groups continue, what impact will that have on Canadians wanting to get vaccinated?
Dr. Hatley says that's what worries her the most.
And you think this can't happen in Canada? How does this happen in our country?
Conspiracy theories thought to exist on the fringes are reaching into the homes of ordinary Canadians, threatening to undermine the pandemic response. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
And be sure to tune into Jeff's story on The New Reality. He speaks to a young woman whose mother became a conspiracy theorist during the pandemic. That's tomorrow at 7 p.m. right here on Global. Up next, decoding in different dimensions how Earthlings solve the puzzle on Mars. When NASA successfully landed Perseverance on Mars, the space agency hinted there was a secret message hidden inside the rover's red and white parachute. That sent internet sleuths into a tailspin to try to solve it. Well, our Eric Sorensen caught up with the college student from France who cracked the code.
Heat shield set.
The images were extraordinary.
Tango Delta.
The rockets, the rover, the resolution of pictures from the red planet. And there was the parachute. And something most people missed, the pattern. It's not symmetrical, but neither is it random. Seems NASA had a little fun with that.
Sometimes we leave messages in our work for others to find for that purpose. So we invite you all to give it a shot and show your work.
That's all the inspiration Maxence Abela needed.
I'm a big fan of space exploration.
The computer whiz called up his software engineer dad to try to crack the message.
I saw it as a tip that we had to look for something, and we proceeded to try and decode that.
So what coded message would Earthlings take to another planet?
Space, the final frontier.
May the Force be with you.
To infinity and beyond!
Endless possibilities. For Maxence, the real meaning was embedded in that design on the parachute. The orangey red colors and the whites could be translated to a binary code of ones and zeros. Basic computer translation and the right counting scheme produced specific letters of the alphabet, and in a clockwise pattern revealed this: Dare Mighty Things. That and the GPS location of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. Cute.
We found numbers that corresponded to alphabetical positions.
Max did indeed show his work online.
We found their mighty things that way. It was very nice. It's awesome.
It's also the motto of the JPL team. You can see the phrase all around NASA, the message hiding in plain sight when Chen spoke.
And we still get to dare mighty things together.
It's from a speech by U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt long ago: to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure. And that is the essence of space exploration. Push the limits, fail sometimes, and when successful,
touchdown confirmed.
Celebrate.
Safely on the surface of Mars.
Taking one more step forward in scientific discovery. Maxence Abela says he feels a part of the team now and dares to hope he has taken a small step toward the career he wants in space technology. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
That's the best story of the day. And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Robin Gill. Here's a riddle to start the weekend. Why did the chicken hit the slopes?
I'm sledding with a chicken. Oh my goodness, you need some.
Because this 4-year-old wanted to take her pet named Chicky Boo on a ride. A Saskatchewan farmer captured her daughter's foul play, and it's now a viral sensation. And it just goes to show chickens can be brave. Thank you for watching. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.